Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of Islam for Europeans. I am your host, Robert. Please like and subscribe to our channel. Very pleased to have a good brother that we've known for some time. He has a wonderful channel on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to his channel. It is the eponymous self-named channel Lavader, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Assalamu alaikum, Lavader. How are you doing today?
Walaikum assalam, brother. I am very glad to be here today and to talk with you.
Excellent, great. Yeah, so I guess we'll get right into it. Topic number one, of course, is the horrible terrorist attack that happened in Mandeburg, Germany. For those who are unaware, there was a man from Saudi Arabia who tr had many extreme beliefs. When it first occurred, it was, people were saying that he was some sort of like extremist Muslim, but as it turns out, he was an ex-Muslim who had been, running this kind of like organization to try to get extradite or get other ex-Muslims from the Gulf into Germany. He was well liked by the likes of Yasmin Mohammed and Tommy Robinson and other anti-Islam accounts. And this was basically, I guess, his motivation from what we're hearing is that Germany did not do enough to stop the Islamization of Europe. So, there's been a lot of noise about that on Twitter. Obviously, it's a very charged event. It's a very tragic event as Muslims, we're completely against the taking of innocent life. We're completely against vigilantism. And, this is going to have obviously horrible ripple effects on the entire Muslim community, but more specifically in Germany and Europe proper. So I wanted to get your take on it, Lavader. Tell me, like where you were exact, like roughly, and like what was your reaction, to these chain of events as they occurred?
Well, I believe the exact moment when I received the news about this horrible, horrible tragedy was I was on my computer while I was uh recording some uh recording some audio files for my upcoming video, and then I looked over at Twitter and then I suddenly received the breaking news well, and like the thing is, of course, it was an absolute tragic attack, and I believe every Muslim and every non-Muslim should show condolences and to the families whose family members were taken by this attack. However, this is unfortunately something that we are seeing here in Germany, unfortunately, more and more often. Like a couple of months ago, you also had an incident where there was, I believe you also heard of it, where there was this clash between a a right-wing German and an Arab refugee, and the police tackled the German to like save the refugee, and then the refugee stabbed him in the back with a knife. I don't know if you heard about that.
I didn't hear about that. That's absolutely awful. Wow, that's
Mm.
just see. I grew up in Canada, and like when I converted to Islam in 2003, there were about 15 to 20,000 Muslims in the city that was closest to me. This city has about 220,000 people, so they made up a big chunk of the population. You never saw stuff like this. Muslims were integrated members of the society. They were doctors, lawyers, real estate agents, but you never saw, the level of carnage and violence that you do in Germany. Without getting into too much detail, like what are your general thoughts on, why, this happens basically? Like, is it a selection bias of people who have extremist thoughts? Is it a I know it's a kind of a broad question, but just give us your take on it to explain to us, North American Muslims as to why you might think that there's a high propensity for Muslims to do this.
Well, I believe that the most obvious answer to this question is the fact that a lot of these people who come to Europe, they are refugees, they are, economic migrants looking for a better life, illegal migrants coming there illegally. And I believe that a lot of these people who are trying to come to Europe, they already from the get-go were let's just say, not exactly stable and good people. Because I believe that if they, like, there is a reason why they are going to Europe in the first place. I don't doubt that there are perhaps some of them who are actually have, more college educated and actually looking for better jobs. But I would say the vast majority of them are like from this complete lower strata, who basically want to go to Europe to, live off of the benefits and then, send the money back or something because because they actually do, like, a lot of these illegal immigrants, they have a reputation here that they are basically welfare leeches. That they just sit around all day doing absolutely nothing, collecting all the paychecks, not doing a job, while the German government in general just doesn't exactly do much. And I also believe another factor is that these people have more than likely already been radicalized in their own home countries before coming to Europe, like either from ISIS, Al Qaeda, or even some more Salafi jihadist branches, and that is why they come to Europe in these masses, and they already have this. Uh, already developed view of how they view these nations, how they view the United Kingdom, how they view Germany, be already from a very negative, disdainful way. So to them, when they go to these countries, they treat it as as leeches, leeching off of the welfare, seeing it as perhaps some kind of reparations for the colonialism and such. And then they also completely refuse to, assimilate or integrate or even learn the language, because they actually have this disdain for the country already from within them. So these people, in my opinion, are just a ticking time bomb when they are finally going to decide one day, you know what? A time for me to exert my revenge on them.
It's really, really unfortunate. I mean, like, here in North America, like, like you don't hear about, I guess you don't hear about the ins and outs, of why these occur. With the Muslim community itself, um, like there's just not really an explanation as to why, the events like in Europe might occur. It's easy to brush it off as like a false flag or, done by certain, government agents. But, the fact of the matter is that, these events are occurring. Um, what do you have, you know, you're a Muslim living in Europe, do you meet other Muslims who feel the same way you do, that this is a problem, that this is having a negative effect on the Muslim community? Is it more like, are Islamic organizations more left wing there? Like what's the reaction to that? I mean, do you are your views kind of accepted within, different Muslim circles?
Well, to be fair, I haven't actually really been that around many of these Muslim circles in Germany. Now, I have, of course, met a few Muslims and talked with them, but like I haven't gotten this like general view. I'm not a completely active member of the community. Like, of course, I try my best to go every Friday when I can to the mosque to do Friday prayers and such, but like a general, like this active approach, no. However, this is just my opinion from what I've pretty much observed from other Muslims outside of my community, like either in public or in university and such. It's that a lot of these Muslims, actually the overwhelming majority of them here, they are more or less identify with the left wing of the political spectrum, and they are more on the side of the left wingers because It is because they have this idea of already this like leftist idea of oh these Western countries, oh, the colonialism, they exploited us and such. So and then when they like see like these things happening, like with these, like for example the grooming gangs in the United Kingdom, they are very easily and eager to, completely dismiss it, or like make up some excuse for it, like, oh, not enough economic opportunities, or oh, maybe they were abused as children, oh, maybe it was some other motive. And they prefer to like really sweep these problems under the rug more than to actually address them. Because let's be completely honest, Robert, there is in fact a problem with a lot of these radical Muslims going around, these grooming gangs. There is a problem here, and the exact issue here is that we're not addressing it. We're kind of running defense for them, and the mainstream media really does not help in this situation. Because there was a lot of outrage here on German Twitter, since I'm also active in German right-wing circles, that the media, like the first thing the media cites when they like reported the Magdeburg attack is like, oh, this guy was Islamophobic, oh, anti-Islam critic attacks Christmas market. And they're all like kind of, how do I say, they're not happy because like this guy killed so many people, and the first thing you come up with and say is that, oh, he was Islamophobic or he was an Islam critic. And in reality, these things, they just foster more resentment and hatred towards the Muslim community from like the ethnic people there. And this is also going to impact their view on Islam as a religion. Because here's the thing, Robert. I would say the biggest problem Muslims and Islam face today in Europe is that Islam is seen, I would say, like the behavior of the Muslims and the immigrants here have contributed to this view that Islam is seen as the quote unquote Arab religion. Because when you think of Christianity, let's say, like the first thing that comes to mind is, Jesus, the cross, and the first thing that comes to mind is the faith, the doctrines of the faith, like the Ten Commandments and such. But when you think of Islam and Muslims, the very first thing that comes to your mind are Arabs, like they're like all these big beards, like this completely alien dressing stuff, the niqab and such. And people exactly have this view that Islam as an Arabian religion, that it comes here and it pretty much erases the original culture and replaces it with an Arabian one. And again, the way these immigrants and a lot of these other quote unquote civilized Muslims are acting and running defense for them, they're not helping in combating these views. They're absolutely not helping.
Yeah, I agree. Here in Canada, it's kind of the same thing. If Muslim organizations, I guess by default, always ally with the left. I guess you can't really blame them to a degree because the right side of the political spectrum, is replete with like people who don't like Islam and Muslims. So I can understand why they don't want to ally with the right, but they end up allying with the left. I mean, just a couple of days ago, the government of Canada released I guess, kind of like a demographic on Muslims in Canada, and it had like the four largest racial groups that make up the Muslim community, and like they didn't say racial groups, they said racialized groups. So even within like the demographic, these is kind of like a left wing language. But let's get to solutions because I know you wanted to talk about that. What would you say is the role of Muslims of European descent, whether that's majority Muslim countries, Bosnia and Albania, or European descendant converts to Islam? I don't know if you want to break that up into two categories, but what is the role of European descendant Muslims, and how can we sort of change the game on the image of Islam in Europe?
I would say probably the most important thing right now to do, even though this might be very uncomfortable for a lot of Muslims to do, is to try and open dialogue with the right wing. because I myself am right wing, and the vast majority of my audience is Christian conservative. Like they're all on this like same page on the right wing side of the political spectrum. And I've also talked to many other people, also in real life, with political meetups and such here in Germany, and a lot of them they're not these like bad people who just hate Muslims for absolutely no reason. Like I've talked with them and they've always completely accepted me, like they like my work and such, because because if they hate Islam and Muslims, which let's be real, a lot of them do, then we need to get to the origins. Why exactly is that? And most importantly, is there perhaps a chance or way for us to change their view of that? Because again, the biggest, probably one of the biggest factors into play here are like a lot of these refugees and what they are doing here, stabbing people well willy-nilly while shouting Allahu Akbar. And then like more, civilized Muslim communities here, they don't really do anything to actually address these problems. They don't actually like go out and, in my opinion, just really address the issue as it is. They more or less run like a defense for them. And another interesting aspect is that when things like Al Qaeda and radical Islam are brought up and what are its origins, a lot of these Muslim like influencers, YouTubers, and all sheikhs and such, all they really like to do, like Muhammad Hijab, Ali Dawans, they just like to say, oh, they are not Muslims, they're not acting Islamically, they are lunatics and such, but they don't exactly answer the question of why and from where did these beliefs completely originate from? Why do they believe in these things? They're not answering these questions. And I'm actually in the process of researching for myself about the origins of Salafi jihadism, and I am meaning to actually make a very comprehensive and in detail documentary on my channel on exactly why they sprung up in the first place and what are their ideas and where did it all come from, because those are the questions I believe a lot of these Islamic figures are not exactly touching upon, like for example its relation to Sayyid Qutb. I mean, how many people in the world have heard of Sayyid Qutb? No, almost none of them. And then also like the in relations to some of the Salafi doctrines and like these strict literalism in interpretations of Islamic texts. Like there is some nuance here. But the point is, for example, a lot of these people, they believe, like the Western right-wingers, they believe that Islam or Islamic theology is this completely unified theology where if one Muslim believes one thing, the other believes in the other thing. So like if a Muslim does a terrorist attack, they all believe, oh, look, all these other Muslims believe in that as well, when in reality, Islam is just as, if not a little more divided theologically like Christianity. Like you have Sunni Shia, you have Ibadi, and then even within Sunnism, you have the Aqidas like Maturidism, Asharism, Atharism, and in the past you had so many more of them. But again, a lot of these people are not aware of these things. They are not aware about all these other sects and all these theological interpretations like reason versus strict or rigid textualism. And a lot of these Muslim figures, they also never bring up these differences. Like, for example, if let's say a Salafi jihadist guy out there goes on the street and says we need to impose complete Sharia law, like behead all infidels, such, they don't want to emphasize and declare that they belong to this specific one group that has these and these interpretations of the matter, but we do not believe in their interpretations and such. Because I believe like a lot of these people, like Muhammad Hijab, Ali Dawah, and all these other Muslim figures, I believe like when they discuss issues and such, they speak about them in a very general way. Like, for example, saying this is the Muslim position, like the general Muslim position, instead of things like, oh, this is the Athari position or this is the Maturidi position. And I believe one aspect of that, and I think this could explains that they don't really exactly want to engage in sectarianism by, placing the blame for these and these things on this one sect and such, or like the other stuff. But again, what this just leads up doing is just confirming this belief a lot of right wingers have is that Islam is this one unified doctrine and that there are no real theological differences in how things are interpreted. And I believe we should also emphasize these differences and actually explain them, like where did Salafi jihadism come from? Who are the thinkers behind it? What interpretations led to them developing these ideas? And I believe these things should be more openly discussed in order to naturally also make sure that we distance ourselves from them. Because what ends up doing is these right wingers then start putting Salafi jihadists, Sufis, Maturidis all in the same basket. When in reality, for example, the Salafi jihadists have always been persecuting Sufis, for example, and now they're basically getting put in the same basket as their oppressors. And this, I believe, should be a lot more emphasized among Muslims, like these differences. Uh, but yeah, I believe that should also be an aspect we should really be discussing more.
Okay. All right. I mean, thanks for that, Lavader. Like, I actually have, many Salafis that watch my show. I've had them on my show before. I just interviewed actually Sensei Abu American. He just interviewed me. Um, Islam for Europeans is a non-denominational Sunni group. What I would like to do is, have more discussion between um, Salafis and those who follow like the Ashari and Maturidi tradition, because from I mean, I also watch Ali Dawa, Muhammad Hijab, and stuff like that. And even I get what you're saying. That it points to that that the people who hold these beliefs are holding to a particular ideology. Having said that, like I do think that there are many people in the Salafi Dawa, who do not hold these beliefs at all, and in fact, like do their part, to reject the idea that that it's okay for someone to do a terrorist attack like this.
Of course, that is why I specifically said
Yeah.
Salafi jihadism.
Well, if you
Like that is why I also make that distinction.
what I would like to do is have more dialogue between these two, like I don't want to call them sects, but like traditions or schools of thought within Islam. That way we kind of better flesh out these ideas. I do see where you're coming from. Like when I converted to Islam in 2003, the Salafis basically ran the show in North America in terms of like running masajid and things like that. The Maturid or Ashari tradition, wasn't really prominent that much. And then, things became more even. But I get what you're saying, Lavader. Like it definitely, in any case, we as Muslims really need to look in, like be educated about our religion, and what it says, what it doesn't say. I mean, how many Muslims know the basic fact that we're against vigilantism? Like even if you believe that, like if you're like a halfway educated Muslim who believes that it's that who's an extremist, how many people actually know that there has to be like a legal framework that you just can't go out and do vigilante justice. So I do agree with you that education is important, and I do think we need to get to the root of why some of these Muslims are doing these things.
Hmm.
But in any case, let's if we want to shift gears a little bit. I saw your video on why conservatives should embrace idealism, and I thought it was a really fascinating video because I think you know if I could sum up your thesis, correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that the left, even though they may not have all the facts, and they don't they play more on emotion than actual factual evidence in terms of running a government or their worldview and whatnot. The way that they present their message, this idea of a utopia, that is the reason why they get so much popularity, even though they may not have the facts. Whereas, the right, for the most part, it's the inverse. They have all the facts, as you said. Ben Shapiro always says, "Facts don't care about your feelings," but but they completely reject any type of utopianism or idealism. I want to apply this, to the Islam for Europeans mold, because we could what we're trying to do is present this idea that a future out in the distance where European descendant Muslims have this kind of thriving sub community, which the idea of that being possible or not isn't the is it shouldn't be saying this is the goal that we're trying to achieve and we're going to achieve it, and this will be like this sort of utopia after we do. But it's good to have that in the distance. So I just want to get your thoughts on that. Should we embrace this kind of idealism and applying this, like Islam for Europeans, or your particular view of like the role of Muslims in Europe?
Well, I believe one very important factor and a lot of mistakes Muslim apologetics and such really commonly do is that a lot of this, Islamophobia, like, oh, ban Islam from the world, ban all mosques, ban the Quran, they are all completely emotionally driven because they play on people's emotions. Like, for example, when the Magdeburg attack happened, instantly on Twitter, you could see things like people advocating ban Islam, kick all Muslims out, eradicate Islam and such. Like these things, these rhetorics utilized by populists, like for example, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, they are mostly based in emotions. They're mostly based in feelings rather than facts. And this is why, uh, it's something I've explained in the video. This is why it is so prominent. This is why it is so popular. It is because it plays on people's emotions. And again, we can apply what you just said to the Muslim community. How does the Muslim community try to combat these things? By playing on reason. They want to play on reason. Oh no, they want to go like whole intellectuals and things. But as I've said in the video, you cannot bring reason to an emotional battle and expect to win. You can't. Uh, that is why we actually need. So the only way to counter emotions is with other emotions. Perhaps we need something stronger, something more emotional, something that could captivate like the masses much better than this Islamophobic rhetoric spilled by a lot of these people. Now, I don't think that we should be completely irrational, like completely nullify and abandon reason. I believe the most important fact is when it comes to individual people you are talking to, like in a small group, then you should utilize reason. Because when talking directly, one-on-one to a person, they are much more likely to see reason. And another thing I've also emphasized in the video is that people are emotional beings by nature, and all their opinions they are connected with emotions. Meaning that if, for example, someone is anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, it is a very high likely chance that this is an emotional attachment to this idea, because they associate Islam with like destruction of their civilization, destruction of Europe, like complete replacement of these people. And this is a very emotional thing for them. So you can't just barge in and come to them and say, well, this is why you're wrong here, here, and here. Even if you're right about the topic, they're not going to change their minds, and your goal is to change their mind. So the approach you need to do, like with these individual people, let's say mostly prominent people, is by changing their mind slowly but surely. Like the very first important part is that they know you're a Muslim and they see you as a good friend. That is the very first important step where they trust you, where they feel safe around you, and they're also aware that you're a Muslim. So you also need to slowly but surely, gradually change their mind, perhaps with little questions like, why do you think this way and such, where they don't feel their views are being attacked. That is very important. You need to navigate this emotional minefield, which for a lot of people is unfortunately not exactly easy, but nevertheless, it can be done. And for example, with my YouTube channel, a lot of as I've mentioned, a lot of my audience is Christian conservative, and a lot of them, I'm pretty sure, also don't have too favorable opinions on Islam. But just the fact that I am there, just the fact that they are watching my channel, just the fact that they are fans of me and are aware of I'm Muslim, that already is slowly shifting some gears in their back mind. So one on one, when you're in small groups, when you're with individual people, most prominently for perhaps influential people, people in positions of power, like leaders of organizations, you need to use reason very carefully to navigate this emotional minefield and eventually change their mind. This is a process that could take, perhaps months or even years, but in the end, it would be worth it. But when you are talking with the masses, like the horde, you need to do it with emotions. You can't do it with reason. That is a very important distinction we need to make. When one on one with people in small groups and such, you need to use reason. When you're with like the crowds of people and such, like the masses, you need to use emotion. So in this case, what could and what kind of emotional reaction could we perhaps use to perhaps counter this Islamophobic one? Well, one aspect I've actually been relatively noticing lately that has been going on in trending with people like Keith Woods is that they are more or less focusing more on Zionism and how this whole anti-Islam Geert Wilders rhetoric is more or less used as a cover to uh, keep people away from to realize how much influence the Zionists and such have. That they are basically using them as Muslims and Christians fighting as pawns to control them, so for entertainment and for them to look the other way. That is why a lot of these people, a lot of these right-wing populists are ardent Zionists like Geert Wilders, and a lot of people on the right, they are starting to notice that. And and when they instantly notice, for example, like Geert Wilders saying something pro-Israel or like kissing the wall in Jerusalem, they're instantly like, "Oh, you are trying to subvert us. You are trying to trick us into fighting amongst ourselves so you could like solidify your influence or something." And I believe this kind of rhetoric, I believe this one, if used well, it could provide this counter emotional thing that we need to combat it. And we already have a few allies on the right with this kind of idea, like Keith Woods, and we need to, of course, reach out to him and perhaps, you know, plan and make some connections there. And I believe we need to develop this idea of that, there because it is a fact that Zionists are extremely prevalent and are very influential in our modern society, and how much they want people to focus on Israel and such. People are starting to notice, and they are starting to, change their minds. That is why Gen Z is very, very skeptical of Israel and Zionism, exactly because we can already see the wind slowly blowing in a different direction, and we need to utilize it to its max extent. That is why we need to use this emotional rhetoric against Zionism to combat this Islamophobic one.
I agree, Lavader. Another thing is that I don't, tell me if you disagree with me or not, is that in 2020, I think Muslims missed a really big opportunity. Well, I mean, I hate to frame it that way because it's such a tragic event. Um, you know, and then after October 7th and such, you had anti-war non-Muslim groups like, for example, Judge Napolitano, um, Douglas McGregor, even Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, who would be on our side when it came to the issues in the Holy Land, but they would also speak out against the war in Ukraine. And I think Muslims missed a big opportunity there because why should we, the only time that Muslim influencers mentioned Ukraine when they said basically it's unfair that the media or that media and government are preferring Ukrainian immigrants as opposed to non-European immigrants. So they just put the spin around on it to make it seem like it was unfair, but it's still a horrible, tragic war. It also, and also there's Muslims living in there's Muslims in Ukraine, there's Muslims in Russia. It also indirectly horribly affected, the economy in the Middle East. So there was no reason why we shouldn't have also been against the war in Ukraine. And I think, that speaks to what you're talking about is that it's an appeal to emotion. Um, because Europe's already been devastated by wars historically, and the war in Ukraine has just caused more death and destruction. So I want to get your thoughts on that, Lavader. Would you say that that's something that was a missed opportunity from the Muslims' end?
Yeah, I do believe that there definitely was a missed opportunity here. Like, from my opinion, from what I have seen, let's just say I think a lot of Muslims who have engaged in this whole war amongst Israel and Palestine and Gaza is that I think you've noticed this as well. Like the whole Palestine conflict for a lot of Muslims has pretty much turned into a de facto cult. Like they are like, of course, I'm not against like, of course, like the war is horrible. We should obviously speak up about that. We should speak about it. But like a lot of these Muslims, they make their whole personality, whole identity around it, and then this leads to things like, for example, I have seen a video recently where like some Muslims they went to Starbucks, McDonald's and such, and they posted a poster like in the front where like, oh, get free snacks and food, and then there is just scan the QR code down there, and then there's the QR code, and then when people scan the QR code, they get bombarded with videos of babies getting their heads blown off, brains and organs falling out of these children in Gaza, and of course these are horrible videos, but why? Like, don't they think that these kinds of things are gonna turn people more away from the cause in Palestine and Gaza than turn people more towards it? Because I've already seen, or for example, they've also like vandalized the Liberty Bell, like spraying free Gaza on them. Like, they really think these efforts are gonna turn more people towards their cause. And to be fair, this isn't just Muslims, but also like leftist pro in general, and they truly think that these things are gonna, turn people towards their side. When I believe that it is having the exact opposite effect. People are more turning towards Israel because of that, and but that is why I also said when I tweeted that video that Israel and Mossad have no reason to print out any propaganda. Western leftists do that now for them. And the I believe this is also something that Muslims should have also perhaps distanced themselves from in some way, while still, keeping eyes about Gaza and the war that is going on, while also making connections with these more right-wing figures like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and such. I believe this could have been a very good opportunity. And amongst now, as I said, like with this anti-Zionist Overton window now more shifting with Candace Owens now being kicked off the Daily Wire, now having her own show where she is talking about this stuff, with Tucker Carlson also kind of questioning these things. You can very clearly see that slowly there is a very tiny shift on the right when it comes to Zionism and the Overton window, and Muslims need to use that. We need to uh, make it clear that we are, on that side, and that we are with them, that we are willing to support, and that we understand their struggles. And this also, and now another aspect, which I'm pretty sure a lot of Muslims are also not exactly comfortable with, is the topic of remigration, where like all of these illegals are completely deported en masse to their home countries to like make Europe and North America more homogenous ethnically. But the way I see it, perhaps remigration could be beneficial for Islam in the West because Now that a lot of these more radicals are shipped out, it could offer the opportunity for white Muslims to actually take control of a lot of these Islamically institutions and be the dominant voice heard. And this offers an opportunity for us to reconcile these relations. And of obviously, it's going to take a long, long time for that to do so. Like the whole illegal immigration thing and what all these refugees have done, they have left behind quite a mess. But with enough time, I believe that can be fixed, and that those efforts are going to be much better when there are no lunatics roaming around stabbing people and shouting Allahu Akbar. And again, and without these attacks and such, then there won't be that much of an emotional reaction. As I said, like that, because then Geert Wilders and a lot of these other people, they, they are not gonna have like their scapegoat now. Oh, look at these terrorists. We need to kick Islam out. And now, when all of these things are resolved with, guess what? People are slowly gonna turn their minds towards the Zionists. And I believe this, as uncomfortable as it may be for a lot of Muslims, we need to open up dialogue with the right, even if, for example, they, sometimes mock our faith and such. We need to approach them with an understanding and get to realize why they have these opinions and see if we're able to change their minds and eventually perhaps even change the entire scope of how they view the world. I believe that is very important, and we do still have an opportunity here. We do have an opportunity here, and we just need to take it.
Inshallah. Inshallah. I mean, yeah, they're been very tough topics for both. The Muslim side, and try. There's some Muslims that are never going to agree to that. I understand. We try to frame it in a way, in an emotional way, that this is actually a good thing. I mean, another way you can look at it is, it's far, far more expensive to house refugees in the in Europe as opposed to the Muslim world. So just from an economic sense, like you could power an entire refugee camp for a whole month, or put a couple of refugees up in a five-star hotel in the UK. That's the way I frame it. From an emotional perspective, lives are at stake here. But also the idea of this kind of communitarian approach to the dawa, I think it was also a missed opportunity.
Mhm.
Like, had we done that since the 90s, you would have seen a Czech Muslim community, you would have seen strict, like a French Muslim community, a Polish Muslim community, a German Muslim community. And had the Muslim community supported that, we would actually have been increasing the total fertility rate. But I think honestly, Lavader, the Muslims are you know Muslim influencers are pretty naive. They really fail to understand that the right is divided into two basic factions. You have the anti-Islam right, like you mentioned, Geert Wilders, and the dissident right, like your Keith Woods and things like that. These are almost completely unknown, to the vast majority of Muslims, because they've been deplatformed so much. So it's unfortunate, but again, inshallah, we have to take the lead in trying to start dialogue with these people. I myself, I don't feel comfortable personally doing it because there's job implications and things like that. But uh, you know, uh, like, may Allah reward you for trying to take this initiative, and trying to establish these dialogues. I think it's incredibly important. Um, so did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about specifically, Lavader? Did you have any questions for me? Any hot topics that you want to bring up? On the top of your head. If not,
Well, as of right now, no, not really. I think I've already said a lot that I've already wanted to say, and I believe another aspect that Muslims really need to distance themselves from is this like very anti-Western perspective they have about everything. Like everything the West does is bad. Like objectively, the West is evil and such. When I believe that they should maybe try maybe approach a more neutral perspective because this also like fogs a lot of our own mistakes and learning from them. Like for example, when you bring up colonialism and such, they say, "Oh, the Muslim world is backwards because of colonialism and such." When there are also other factors that have from the Islamic community within that have contributed to these things. And if we, all blame it on the West and such, we completely fail to recognize our mistakes. Like, for example, a very major part. This is also another video I am working on why the Islamic world is so underdeveloped. For example, during the early Caliphate eras and the Islamic Golden Age, a lot of the ulama and such, they were all almost completely financially independent. There was no such thing as the state publicly funding scholars and a lot of these institutions. When a lot of these scholars, they worked independently as merchants. They also had other jobs, or sometimes they also competed over tutorship of the children of wealthy families or patronage for some selected works, and it was actually in generally a very competitive environment among the ulama, and they also had generally like they did not view state intervention too favorably, and some of them even declared that it was haram to accept state funding and such. And for example, and this also makes sense because all of the four Islamic scholars have founded the four schools of thought. They were all persecuted by the government in some way. And this also and then it was not until like the late Islamic Golden Age and with the development of the Iqta system where the economies are getting more and more militarized, more centralized, and then it emerged this ulama military alliance started forming where things started slowly going downhill. Like this is was a lot of people say that the Mongols were the ones who completely ruined and destroyed the Islamic Golden Age when the process was already slowly underway within the Islamic community. And this is something I also wanted to talk about. And we need to emphasize that our own mistakes in the past and learn from them. But again, this whole anti-colonialism and blaming everything on the West and that the West is objectively evil and that we did nothing wrong, it completely blinds us to these internal problems that we need to address and keep in mind for the future.
Yeah, I mean, even using the term the West, I despise it because when Muslims say the West, they mean anything evil that Western governments have ever done, both contemporarily and historically, right? That's media, government, anything that has a negative effect on the Muslim world is defined as the West. Where to your average Westerner, they hate their government, they hate the media, but when they hear the term the West, they think chicken wings and football and hockey and so I mean even just
Mhm.
framing it that way is just if you could even just change that term to Western governments or the powers that be or the elites or even lizard people, as goofy as it sounds, it would definitely be a step in the right direction.
Mm. And I'm
uh
also sad to see how a lot of plenty of white converts, like for example Daniel Hakikachu, they're also completely falling for this anti-West narrative as well, as they as something, and this is unfortunately a very common rhetoric seen amongst Muslims, is that the West completely deserves to be flooded by refugees. It completely deserves to be replaced by all these other groups exactly because as a revenge for colonialism and such, when these people don't realize that this, at the end of the day, who is going to suffer the most from this? It is the normal everyday Joe who just wants to do his job because the colonialism and such, this was all done at the behalf of the governments. Like the people were not involved in this, and now flooding them with all of these refugees and such, you are basically harming the average Joe more than the government. And in fact, the government wants more immigrants. They want more refugees. That is why they're opening their borders exactly for low-skilled labor to be, exploited and such. Like the higher ups there, they want this. Like this isn't something like they're trying to keep out. No, a lot of them say, "Come in, come in. We need more of them." And then not only are you harming the average Joe with these things and are making him more resentful against Islam and Muslims, you're also not doing anything to like combat the government which initiated these colonial things in the first place. Like you're basically fighting a lost cause that is not going to get you anywhere. This is why I believe the best thing that needs to be done right now for Islam and our true faith to survive in the West is for white Muslims to also advocate for remigration and take the reins and leadership of these Islamic institutions. And instead of portraying Islam as some destructive force that completely destroys cultures, it needs to be portrayed as a more of a filter where the existing culture is not lost, it is still preserved, but it still, went through this filter to make it more in line, for example, with some Islamic values. Like for
Well,
example,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, like if modern German culture, like really the only significant thing that would change in German culture if it was quote unquote Islamicized is there would be a taboo on alcohol and perhaps a few more women would wear the veil, but for the most part that would pretty much be the only significant shifts in culture. Like the language would still be preserved and such, and these things would be much more welcoming to the average German and for him to accept Islam more openly than like for him to have this portrayal that this is a completely alien faith that is going to completely destroy my culture and all the values I stand for. That is why dawa at most best should be done and headed by these ethnic converts who are already familiar with the environment, they are familiar with the culture. For example, a German Muslim is going to have a much more successful time of spreading Islam in Germany than, let's say, a Pakistani Muslim. And I believe this is a very natural thing, and we should, appreciate and respect these differences because Islam is not as some people like to say, like that you need to abandon all cultures in favor of an Arabian one. We Islam is very flexible in cultural matters, and we need to also respect that. And that is why ethnic converts, local converts, white converts have the absolute best chance of spreading Islam and the true faith to Europeans than non-Europeans. And this is just a very basic fact. It's a very observable fact that we must accept.
Yeah, I agree, Lavader. I think it needs to be framed in a very, in a sensitive way. The best way that I can think of, and is that okay, voluntary repatriation. If people choose to, go back, to their homelands. We're already seeing that with many Syrians. There's nothing. I think both sides could agree to that. I guess the only thing that I would be against would be involuntary repatriation of law-abiding Muslims currently in Europe.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
yeah. So I mean, and that I think is fair, and a moratorium on current immigration. And again, not all immigration is Muslim. We have to keep that in mind. Like they always say, Muslim immigration. Most of the immigration to the UK is non-Muslims. Now in Canada, it's vastly non-Muslim
Indians.
Indians. Yeah. So like I think that Muslim has become like this kind of catch-all term, for all immigration. So I mean, even Keith, doesn't frame it in this kind of way. He just says immigration. He doesn't say Muslim immigration. So great conversation, Lavader. Thank you so much for being on our channel. Like I said, please like and subscribe to Lavader's channel. It's really awesome. It's really good that we have more white Muslims though creating their own content that like touches on totally different topics. Oh, very different topics than what we touch on in Islam for Europeans because it's such a vast field that we need to look at it from every other angle. So I'm really happy that other white Muslims are, producing their own content, and I really encourage other Euro Muslims who are fans of our channel, to use your skills to their best advantage. Is that all you had for today, Lavader? I was gonna, I guess we'll wrap it up around the 50-minute mark if you're cool with that.
Well, I think I've already said everything I wanted, so from my side, there is nothing more I want to elaborate on.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, I'm so glad that we were able to finally do this. Sorry about the wait, but thank you so much, Lavader. Let's keep in touch. If you wanted to interview me at some point, you're more than welcome to as well. But I'll leave that up to you. Anyway, I'm your host, Robert at Islam for Europeans. Please like and subscribe to the channel. May Allah bless you all and keep you all safe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.